In 1999, when the first Matrix premiered, it was immediately associated with several philosophers. Plato and his myth about the cave, René Descartes and his thought experiment about the demon, and Jean Baudrillard and his whole spiel. Baudrillard had a particular influence on the Matrix. His book Simulacra and Simulation even appears at the beginning of the movie, and it is not surprising that in a movie the plot of which revolves around the metaphysical and ethical dilemma of reality versus simulation, the name of this postmodernist philosopher would come to mind. But Baudrillard himself claimed that his philosophy has nothing to do with the Matrix movie, and we will see later why. But before that, let's begin with a brief introduction to key Baudrillard's concepts, simulacrum and hyperreality. Simulacrum is the concept of philosophical discourse introduced in ancient thought to characterize, along with literal images that are copies of things, such images that are far from being similar to things and express a state of mind, fantasies, chimeras, phantoms, ghosts, hallucinations, representations of dreams, fears, delirium, etc. Plato in the Sophist linked art with two types of imitation: creating images and creating ghosts, phantasmic images that only seem similar to objects. In the second half of the 20th century, French postmodernist philosopher Jean Baudrillard would use this term simulacrum, or plural simulacra, in many of his works. For Baudrillard, the simulacrum means a copy that lost its original or does not have any original at all. Okay, what does that mean? Well, as long as culture exists, we always had things that represent something they are not. Owning certain things represented affiliation to class, wearing certain clothes represented affiliation to gender or institution, but as much as culture expands, becomes more and more complex and multi-layered, those signifiers become either subverted or things on their own. For example, this trash pouch by Balenciaga was inspired by a garbage bag, but it is being sold for nearly $1,800. It looks like a garbage bag, but it sure does not cost like one. So it simulates poverty while it signals the opposite. These processes of subversion are also very visible in contemporary advertisement. Brands nowadays tend to advertise their products not directly by showing the product and its functionality, but by creating a certain image of life, basically training us to desire not the product itself, but a lifestyle it represents. And we become basically married to these symbolic markers. For instance, in American Psycho, there is a scene where the main character, Patrick Bateman, absolutely loses his mind over someone having a nicer business card than him. Which is ironic, since all characters in both movie and book constantly forget each other's names, and they also seemingly don't do any business or work at all, so their business cards don't have any practical use. They don't mean anything. But what is more interesting for us in the context of Baudrillard's philosophy is that the 2000 American Psycho movie itself became a simulacrum, because Patrick Bateman now is an internet meme, frequently devoid of any critical reflection. For instance, Patrick Bateman is used in these memes as a representation of true masculinity and success, as a total Chad or Sigma male, which is understandable on a surface level because he is played by Christian Bale. Of course, he's great. But the movie's whole point is that underneath this illusion of beauty and success, there is a psychopath, a serial killer, and a pathetic loser who is empty inside. So Patrick Bateman as a meme became a thing on its own, a simulacrum partly or completely devoid of any connection with its original meaning. According to Baudrillard's pessimistic predictions, the further we go, the more our culture becomes overloaded or even obese with simulacra. This obesity with simulacra creates hyperreality, the world where the line between real and simulation no longer exists. Baudrillard characterized modernity as an age of hyperreality, the hysteria of production and reproduction of the real, the domination of image and simulation, labels and signs, memes and cultural markers that are here for us to consume, and also mask the absence of a deep reality or any meaning. Intuitively, it seems that Matrix can be easily placed in Baudrillard's bleak interpretation of our existence. Hyperreality is the Matrix, a shared simulation, while post-apocalyptic landscape of humans in pods is harsh reality. But as I mentioned earlier, Baudrillard was not happy with this interpretation of his work. For him, the problem with Matrix was that in the movie, line between reality and simulation is clear. You can plug in and plug out. Although recent The Matrix Resurrections tried to blur the line a bit more, and I wonder how Baudrillard would react to this movie if he was still alive. Nevertheless, for Baudrillard, the main pitfall of hyperreality is that it cannot be reduced to some technology. Like, we cannot escape hyperreality by logging off social media or stopping to play VR games. The reality is already hyperreal. We don't have a choice to wake up from the Matrix. The only choice we have is to buy a ticket for another movie. Hyperreality absorbs and neutralizes everything, even its own critique. Our existence is already corrupted by science, fashion, advertising, media, distortion of facts, and representations. Although this whole thing sounds very pessimistic, there is no reason to become nihilist over it. Let's take as an example Satoshi Kon's 1997 anime Perfect Blue. A pop idol, Mima, becomes an actress because this is what her agency wants her to do. As a pop idol, Mima already is a kind of simulacrum on which everyone is projecting their own interests. Mima is disposable for her agency, which is solely interested in how much profit she makes. Mima is objectified by her creepy fan stalker who thinks that she owes him to always stay in her true and real image as an idol, which already was a simulacrum. Mima even objectifies herself by sacrificing what she loves, singing, and abiding the rules of the industry, to follow the common pattern for idols, to pursue a career on screen. Mima has no control over her life and can no longer see the line between what is real and what is not. She sees herself through the eyes and actions of other people. The only person that seems to care about Mima as a person is her manager and ex-idol Rumi, who would later reveal her own dark motives, projections, and her own simulacrum. So we see how the image becomes more powerful than the person that is putting this image on herself. And Mima would eventually have to deal with this problem by taking back power over her life and taking back her ability to be a subject of processes, not the object. At the end of the movie, we see Mima coming to terms with her new acting career and stating that she is real, with an ironic smile on her face. Now she decides what is real and what is not. And this is the strategy that Baudrillard proposes as well. In his book Fatal Strategies, the philosopher proclaims the death of the subject as such in hyperreality and the supremacy of objects, the only strategy that he offers is to go over to the side of the object and, ironically, play by the rules of hyperreality that surrounds us.